crazy about when you make this argument, because federal law automatically trumps state law. Well, folks who say that have not been paying attention to the United States Supreme Court recently. Just to give you one example, and it happens to be the example that is most closely on point. Oregon voters a few years ago decided to adopt what was called a right to die law, basically allowing medical assisted suicide. Again, whether you like that law or not, it was a law that Oregon voters enacted for their state. The Bush administration came in and challenged that law, saying that federal law preempts the Oregon law. And the United States Supreme Court said, no, it doesn't. We are going to allow Oregon's law to stand. And in so holding, the court noted that if any contrary decision would mark a wholesale transfer of power over health care from the states to the federal government. So on this issue, we have some very powerful precedents on our side, recent precedents, because this is the most pro-federalism court that any of us, no matter how old we might be, have ever experienced during our lifetimes. So far, there are 4 lawsuits that I know of that are challenging various aspects of Obamacare. The one that Idaho is a part of is a 20-state lawsuit challenging a direct challenge to Obamacare, primarily on state autonomy grounds, and it is currently pending in Florida. And one of the things I really like about that lawsuit is the Supreme Court doesn't like to do radical things. Sometimes it does radical things, but it prefers not to. When you have 20 states on a lawsuit saying that the federal government has overstepped its bounds, it gives a tremendous comfort level to the United States Supreme Court to do the right thing. A second lawsuit was filed by the state of Virginia. They just wanted to do their own thing in their own way. That one is actually moving the fastest. It is pending in Eastern District Court in Virginia. A very bright judge, Henry Hudson, has that. It's already been briefed and argued. We'll be getting our first decision on a challenge to Obamacare probably within the next few weeks. A third one was filed in Mississippi by the state of Mississippi. And a fourth one by a group called the Thomas More Legal Center, focusing on the individual rights aspects of Obamacare. That was filed in Michigan. And as I mentioned, we will be filing our lawsuit against Obamacare in Arizona within the next few weeks. In addition to arguing that Congress didn't have the power to do this in the first place, and arguing that the individual mandate is unconstitutional, we'll be arguing some issues that have not been raised in the other lawsuits, the privacy issue that I mentioned to you, and we're representing individual state legislators and members of our federal congressional delegation. There are a number of issues or a number of actions that Obamacare takes that either coerces them into voting for programs that they don't want to vote for, such as the funding of our Medicaid system in Arizona. We can't get out of it now, or takes powers away from them and transfers them to the executive branch. So it's basically a separation of powers argument that has not been made in the other lawsuits, and we're hopeful that that will work as well. A lot of you are familiar with the McCain-Feingold campaign finance law. That law was challenged after it was passed and the United States Supreme Court upheld it. Since then, little pieces of it have been challenged one by one, and the Supreme Court has been upholding those cases and striking down bits and pieces of the law. It's essentially been a death by 1,000 cuts. That's what I think is going to happen with Obamacare. One of the nifty aspects of it is, if you take any one big piece out of that puzzle, especially the individual mandate, the whole thing comes crumbling down, because it's so interdependent upon each other that I think the more lawsuits, the merrier. I'm glad that Idaho is part of it. One thing I wanted to mention, and I just read about this in Christian Science Monitor, I don't know the details of what happened, and I don't mean to cast aspersions, but there was a lawsuit right here in Idaho that I think may be the beginning of a federal onslaught against doctors and ultimately against consumers. And it was recently settled, and again, I'm relying on the press account of what happened. But basically, a group of orthopedists here in Idaho decided to boycott the workers' compensation system and the Medicaid system because the payments were too low. And they simply said, we're not going to participate in this program at all. Well, apparently the Attorney General of Idaho and the Obama administration filed a lawsuit against them and recently settled it, basically forcing the doctors to participate in this system. And there are a number of chilling things about this particular lawsuit. The first is that it was brought under the federal antitrust laws, and the idea was that this was price fixing. Now, normally, price fixing is you and I get together and we agree on a high price, and there's no competitors, and so we are hurting you as a consumer. The idea here was the failure to accept the government rates is price fixing. The second aspect is, normally antitrust lawsuits against doctors are brought by the FTC. This was brought by the U.S. Justice Department. The difference is the FTC has only civil authority. The Attorney General has criminal authority. The threat there was that these doctors could go to jail for what they were doing, this particular economic activity. And not surprisingly, they capitulated right away. What worries me about this, and a lot of people, demonize doctors and all of this, but if you cut the compensation too low, there won't be doctors to go to. And that's the whole point of this. That's what has happened in other countries that have gone down this path. And it is a very, very, very dangerous precedent. And seeing how the Obama administration is acting in this thuggish manner makes me think that Obamacare is certainly not benign. Well, people ask, what can we do in this regard? At the moment, I think your state has put you, and thanks to the Idaho Freedom Foundation and to the Idaho legislature and to the governor and lieutenant governor, for putting you in a very good position by protecting you with an Idaho Healthcare Freedom Act and by joining the 20-state lawsuit in Florida. So I think right now you've done all you can do. Civil disobedience may be down the road when the individual mandate hits, and we'll see what happens. But one thing each and every one of us can do, and I urge this, in fact, even if you're a non-believer as far as religion is concerned, please pray for the health and longevity of 5 members of the United States. We are so lucky we live in a system that has a separation of powers, and right now, the only thing, the thin black-robed line standing between us and tyranny is our United States Supreme Court. And in the meantime, we've just got to take advantage of that legal system as much as we possibly can, elect members to Congress who will either repeal Obamacare or starve it to death through the appropriations process. Steve and I were talking about this, and it's not necessary to have a new president to starve a program through the appropriations process. All you need is a working conservative majority. So let's just, in closing, one thing I do want to celebrate. This law and this administration has brought freedom-loving people together with so much passion and vigor that I did not think would be possible to see in my lifetime again. That's what I want Obama to go down in history for, is reinvigorating the freedom movement, and I am glad to be among you. Thank you so much.